Claire Clairmont was a headstrong 18-year-old girl who didn't contribute any writings to Byron's 1816 Ghost Story Challenge, but she undoubtedly holds what is probably the most important role in the creation of Frankenstein. Clara, Mary Jane Clairmont, or Claire Clairmont as she would become known later, was born in 1798. She was the second and youngest child of Mary Jane Vale Clairmont, her brother, Charles, being 3 years older. Now, both children came from different fathers, and Mary Jane got around the illegitimacy issue by claiming to be the widow of a Charles Clairmont. In 1801, the Clairmont family moved to London and became neighbors to William Godwin. Godwin, who had become a widower 4 years earlier after the death of his wife, Mary Wollstonecraft, had 2 daughters. One was Fanny Imlay, who was the daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft and an American merchant named Gilbert Imlay, and the other was Mary Godwin, the daughter of William Godwin and Mary Wollstonecraft. Now, in 1801, Claire's mother married William Godwin, and the family moved in together. And it wasn't too long before another member, a son named William, was added to the family. Now, the children grew up in a diverse and radical environment due to what was perceived as Godwin's progressive philosophies at the time. Both parents were well educated, but Mary Jane was highly unliked by many of Godwin's contemporaries. As a matter of fact, Charles Lamb referred to her as an infernal bitch. She had a volatile temper and made no premise about favoring her own children over her husband's, and Mary Godwin, later Mary Shelley, quickly developed a dislike and resentment towards her stepmother. Now, Mary and Fanny were primarily educated by a governess named Maria Smith and by their father, who believed that schools were a form of social control restraining the independence of thought of children. Now, while Claire received a more formal education, she was sent away to boarding school, and she became fluent in 5 languages, proficient at the piano, and had a lovely singing voice that was described as a string of pearls. Each note was so perfect. Mary was more of a scholar, and she, of course, had inherited her parents' literary gifts. And even with these differences, the 2 girls did bond. But, as is often the case, as they grew older, jealousy entered the sibling relationship, and the 2 girls were often in competition with each other, and they quarreled frequently. Now, Claire grew into a dark-haired beauty with a steadfast determination in getting what she wanted, and one of the things that she wanted most was Lord Byron. Claire, who was in constant competition with Mary, was jealous of her stepsister's relationship with a handsome, young, yet unknown poet who was a disciple of her father, and his name was Percy Bysshe Shelley. Now, Percy was also still married, but that's another video. Claire decided if Mary had a poet, well, she was going to get a better one. Now, Claire had briefly met Byron on a few occasions, and she began to pursue him in the spring of 1816. Now, this was probably Byron's most vulnerable period, as he was going through a divorce from Lady Byron, or Annabella Milbank, and he was also under a lot of stress because he was getting threats about his supposed incestuous relationship with his sister, Augusta Lee. Now, Claire decided to start writing to Byron, and Byron ignored her first letter, but Claire wasn't one to be put off, so she wrote him again, and after the second attempt, Byron agreed to meet with her. Now, while Byron did enjoy Claire's company, he liked listening to her sing and play the piano, he was very, very clear about the fact that he did not want to have a relationship with her. But, well, Claire being Claire, she persisted and finally managed to seduce Byron. When Byron packed up and headed to Geneva, Claire was determined to follow him. Now, by the time that Mary, Percy, and Claire met Byron in Geneva, it was pretty obvious that Claire was pregnant. And once again, Byron reiterated that he had no intention of resuming the affair with her. But in a letter, Byron wrote, "What could I do? A foolish girl, in spite of all I could say or do, would come after me, or rather went before me, for I found her here. I could not exactly play the stoic with a woman who had scrambled 800 miles to unphilosophize me." Now, Byron and Claire's daughter was born in Bath in January of 1817. Claire named her Alba, and Byron would later change the name to Allegra. And it didn't take long for Claire to realize that she wasn't going to be able to care for her daughter in the way that she wanted her to be cared for, so she reluctantly released her to Byron's care. Byron shifted his daughter from household to household before finally installing her in an Italian convent. And while Byron had banned Claire from seeing her daughter, he did allow Shelley to visit. And even though little Allegra had written some notes pleading with Byron to come visit her, he never did. Now, Claire was so desperate to see her daughter that she actually asked Percy Shelley to help her kidnap Allegra by forging a letter from Byron, and Percy was like, "No, I'm not getting involved in that." Now, in 1822, Allegra developed a fever, and on April 20th, she died at the age of 5. Claire and, surprisingly, Byron were both devastated by the news. Now, to be fair, Claire did pursue Byron even though he told her he was not interested. However, this doesn't forgive Byron for what he did, because using Allegra as a tool against Claire to cause Claire as much pain as he could, well, that's just about the highest level of cruelty that you could do to somebody else. And Claire wound up hating him for the rest of her life, writing that Byron, a human tiger, slaking his thirst for inflicting pain on defenseless women. Now, there is also speculation about the relationship between Percy Shelley and Claire, and there was even some rumors stating that they had a child together. However, Mary Shelley wasn't buying it. She wrote, "I am perfectly convinced in my own mind that Shelley never had an improper connection with Claire. We lived in lodgings where I had momentary entrance into every room, and such a thing could not have passed unknown to me." Now, after Shelley's death in 1822, a friend of Shelley and Byron's, John Trelawney, had asked Claire to marry him. As a matter of fact, he begged her to marry him, but Claire just wasn't interested. And even though she refused him, the two did remain in touch with each other for the rest of their lives. Now, Claire would live out her long life. She did everything from work as a governess in Russia to a companion and housekeeper in Dresden, Germany, and even a music teacher in England before she finally settled in Florence, Italy, where on March 19th, 1879, she died at the age of 80. Now, Claire did have literary ambitions, and she even tried to get Percy Shelley to get some of her writings published, but nothing ever happened with them, and they've been lost to history. However, if Claire had never pursued Byron, we would never have had the masterpiece that is Frankenstein, and for that, I am eternally grateful to her. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing, because there'll be more coming soon on History by the Book. Bye-bye.